So the novel that really um, completely changed my life and changed my entire understanding of race in America and how it functions happened when I was in my last year of college because I took a comparative lit class. And one of the novels we read in that class was Native Son by Richard Wright. And this is Richard Wright here on the back. And this is the copy that I had in college. That first one that I ever had. And it's filled with its little markings and underlinings and notes and things all the way through it. And this is one of the few books I've ever owned that has been with me since I was, 21. So the last 23 years, I have had this book, and it comes with me everywhere. And I've been contemplating this weekend why. Like, why is that? It was important enough in shifting my whole mindset and understanding. It literally changed my life in every way, but it almost changed my career path, because after reading it, I understood all other African American literature instantly from a completely different place as well. It all took on a completely new meaning. It no longer felt, for whatever reason, this novel did that. But I remember nothing else after that ever felt the same. And I couldn't see, I couldn't go back to sleep again fully. I couldn't ever make another action without realizing that my own inaction, my own words, behavior, etc. had a real impact, and to know and understand fully what that might be. Suddenly that was clear, and it's never gone back to being unclear. And again, it's interesting to me because this novel survived, 15 different moves to different homes and apartments in London over the course of 10 years. It survived several different moves in the United States with me, where I actually gave away most of the books that I had at one point. I mean, I always have too many books, but I had given away most of my novels and things from when I did my degree in lit. And this one I've never, ever been able to let go of. And I realized this week that because of it, in Tibetan, you can see, go back this way, you can see behind me there, right there, where those, those are where my sacred texts are, right? You put them in special, in a special case. Those are the texts for practicing, and they're practice texts, because they hold the capacity for you to find enlightenment. So you wrap them in special cloth, and you put them on your altar. You keep them in a special place, because they hold the seeds of your awakening. You could say that any book that has that kind of effect of changing your perspective, changing your worldview, has that same capacity for awakening. And I think that actually is why this book has always traveled with me. It has always been given like a special place on my bookshelf. It has served as I took it with me and had it on my bookshelf at work. Like, it's literally sits right there, as I'm looking at my bookshelf, and it's always right there where I can see it in the exact same spot. And I've noticed that I do that whenever I shelve books in a new place, wherever it moves. It tends to be that it's one of the first books on the top shelf, in my library. And it's because of the impact it had on my understanding. If you've never, I kind of feel like I want to talk about it more and in more detail. And so I've been reading it, I've been rereading it again. So that's why there's a post-it there or a note, because I've been reading it again and rereading it. And I was jumping around at first, and then I realized, no, I just need to go back and start at the beginning, and get, follow Bigger Thomas's, his journey and trajectory from the beginning, and understand it from who and where I am right now as a person. Because obviously I see it with greater depth and I understand it with greater depth. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm contemplating the possibility that maybe I need to wrap this book, be giving it its own special place again, where I see it every day, where it's a reminder every single day. This is who you are. This is not separate from you. This is the impact that your actions and your lack of awareness and those seeds that are a part of, being white in this society, gives you, because we're not accustomed to seeing it. It's not convenient to see it. It's not convenient to think about it. It's not convenient to look at it, but it's necessary. When you see or understand a character like this from that perspective, it changes you deeply. I don't know why it was this book and not another, but I can only tell you that it was this book. I then went on to read everything that Richard Wright wrote, because I felt like he just felt like a part of my soul at that point. And I wanted so badly to understand him better. So I went on to read Black Boy, which is kind of an autobiographical book. Again, if you look at the price here, I somehow got it for $2.99. So that tells you about like how old it was, and it was the same, same publisher. And I also just love the cover art on both of these. But, especially as a leftist and as an ally, I would say maybe, these two books, they seem really thick. Keep in mind, they read fast. They kind of have a way of absorbing you so quickly that you can't, it's hard to look away. It was for me. I think understanding why white allies fail, and the ways in, the construct around how and why we fail is something that is best probably described in Black Boy, more so maybe than Native Son. Although I say that, I'm rereading both of them right now because I feel like, although I'm started here, but I'm going to be rereading both of them. This is harder to take. It's a lot more, it has an urgency to it that is not quite the same in Black Boy. Black Boy is really Richard Wright's own story. And his experience with the Communist Party, which of course was run by white people who were trying very hard at that time to be allies, to the African American community. And there are characters certainly in Black and Native Son that are trying to do the same thing. His employer at the beginning of, I guess it's midway through. I'm right now in that spot. Midway through the first book, book one, he encounters with his new employer who's white, and is a member of the NAACP. And of course, it was a very different organization at that time and functioned very differently. but his intentions were to be able to help, the African American community in the United States to move forward and to progress. And without really, the ways in which the family doesn't understand what that experience is, and therefore, in many ways, helps to create, can help create the conditions that do more harm than good, is sickening and heartbreaking. Really sickening and heartbreaking. All of it is. And it's so beautifully written and beautifully done. So those are two. I've also been coming back to, once I found out that Ta-Nehisi Coates was such a fan of Richard Wright, I had been reading he writes for The Atlantic. I had been reading, some of his work, but somewhere in here we lost the cover to this one, but let's see. Yeah, there we go. Between the World and Me. Again, it's very, it's a very, very short book, comparatively speaking, and it's profound. Reading it can change your life. Tom and I read this when he was in grad school, and it was still a brand new book. And then finally, one of the teachers from the Tibetan tradition that Lama Tsultrim likes to work with is Lama Rod Owens, who is also African American. And he got together with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams, who is a Zen practitioner, and Jasmine, I don't know her, Jasmine Saidula, who's a PhD, and wrote this incredible book, Radical Dharma, back in 2016, talking race, love, and liberation. And it's a really beautiful, work, collaborative work. It's very frank, and of course, because Lama Rod and Reverend Angel Kyoto come from two traditions that I've studied in, it also helps to frame what they're saying, and where they're coming from, because they're each very much shaped by their experiences, as African Americans, but also shaped by the traditions that they practiced in so much. And I would say too, often as like an extreme minority, there are so few African Americans practicing as Buddhists. It's extremely rare. One that some of our community might be familiar with is I believe she's Reverend. I would bet money on it, actually. Reverend Zenju, Earthland Zenju Manuel, because she also did the Black Angels Oracle deck. Her works are beautiful. You can find she is in magazine article, Buddhist magazine articles everywhere. If you Google her, I may find some that I can attach to this video. She's amazing. She's amazing. And she really does allow her practice as a Zen, as a Zen practitioner, to be influenced very deeply by other practices and by traditions, that come from her background, from the African American community. So I tend to like all Buddhist practitioners that do that, because that's ultimately where I've ended up too, obviously. So anyone that does that, I'm like, oh, look, here's another Zen practitioner that thinks tarot's great. Or here's another Buddhist that thinks tarot is great, Plenty of reasons for that are probably appropriate for another video. But anyway, those are just 4 that came to mind, because these are the 4 that I've been sitting with in the last week and reading through. And reviewing. Yeah. yeah. I mean, it just, in an attempt, in an ongoing, this has been an ongoing thing for me since I went to teach at DePaul, really, to be not just an ally in theory, but an ally in practice. What do I do in my practice, in my life, in my day-to-day existence that helps me to be a better ally? And as I've said before, and I'm sure I'll say it many, many more times, that means failing pretty regularly. I wind up saying things that are incorrect or stumbling over things and realizing like, whoa, I did not realize what came out of my mouth when I said that. And, all I can say is that it helps, if being more spiritual is really what you want, if what you really want is to be helpful from the spirit, from your soul, you're going to be humbled a lot. You're going to be humbled a lot because we get a lot wrong. And it's not you. It's not personal. That's the part that has to be taken out of it. When it becomes personal, it's easy for us to become defensive. And what we have to do moving forward is let go of that defensiveness, and to be willing, really deeply, humbly, to learn, so that we can understand why. What is it and why? Why does it play out like that? But I think first and foremost, we have to recognize that it's not, that those the systems and patterns in place. And I would say this is for both sides, right? This is something for all of us. If we're going to see it in terms of sides, literal sides and literal black and white, right? These are roles that are not, they're not who we are. They're not who we are at the core. And it's fine to understand that from a theoretical point of view or an intellectual point of view. But the truth is, to really know that deeply, we have to understand what those roles are that are being played, how they're laid out, how we interact with them, because a lot of it's conditioning. And part of conditioning are the literal conditions of everyday life that are laid out, some of which we come into contact with in a way that is, depending on the color of your skin, incredibly violent and incredibly impossible to ignore, overlook, move beyond. And I think equally difficult in terms of moving beyond is, to come into contact with conditions of great comfort, and privilege and ease and, the ability to say, it's okay, I can look past this, I need a break, I'm going to go do something else for a while, right? I once remember, I've had several, but this particular teacher said it in a way that didn't feel like he was patronizing us. It was a Chinese Zen teacher called Guo Gu, and he said, you don't come to a mat and cushion to sit in a crazy pretzel position if your life is really good and you don't have any struggles or problems. Similarly, you don't come to sit on a mat and cushion if your life is really horrible, because you can't, and you can't find your way from one day to the next without extreme difficulty and pain. Because the last thing you're going to want to do is figure out how you can sit in a funny pretzel position and listen to some guy talk way slower in coded words and language that you can't understand easily. And so it's a funny, unique set of conditions where it's possible to sit in the center of that, I guess, in a funny pretzel position for a while and look at both angles of it. And I'm hopeful that because this is, a community that, has come together because there's some way in which all of us are able to come together in our own funny pretzel position, of our minds and our hearts, to be present with one another in some form or other, that we can look at how to address this and move forward from a place of a greater sense of community, and a greater sense of care for one another that is ongoing and that has a purpose, and that is not a flash in the pan or something that arises for a little while because it matters for a little while, but at a certain point stops being important. Because it only stops being important when you have the ability for it to do so, when you have the privilege for it to do so, right? But if your body is not, if you are not encased in a black body, you can't, it doesn't ever stop. It's always there. Always. So it needs to be something that is important enough that it continues beyond this point and into the future. Yeah. And again, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what to do necessarily, but I kind of just want to share what that process is and what it looks like right now, and what that intent is. And I really hope that there are enough of us in the community, enough of us who regard ourselves as allies in one way or other, who will feel able and willing, to talk about that moving forward, and to continue looking at how it affects those of us in the community who are not like us, who are not white, who are in any way marginalized, because it matters deeply. You can't be on a spiritual journey, a real one, and have that not matter really, really deeply. And it's okay not to know what to do. It really is. It's really okay not to know what to do. But if you're willing to show up and you're willing to examine it, and take the steps of moving forward, it can be very possible, for us to shift things. We hold a lot more power, a lot more influence than any one of us ever realizes. So how do we want to use that in a way that genuinely loves, marginalized individuals who are a part of our community and a part of any community and part of the world, how we want to love them. How do we turn that feeling, that heart-centered feeling of I love, I feel compassion, what do I do? How do we galvanize that into action, into real action? Yeah. Okay. This is also a very long video. There's just a lot to say. there's a lot to say. So yeah, I think I can let it go now, and finish there. And I just look forward to having more dialogue as we move forward. Thanks, everyone.